We have all of these problems, and it all comes back around to everything's broken, nothing works, and why? It's because integration is always an afterthought. The way the government wants to acquire things and the way they want to sustain them and manage them over time is never thought of. And we can't yada yada that when we stand our own thing up.
Thousands of companies show up to sell their technology to the U.S. Department of Defense each year. But so few will transition from proof of concept to true production across the valley of death. The select few who do, their stories are rarely told. Until now. I'm Noah Scheinbaum, and this is Crossing the Valley.
John Goodson is one of the most mission-driven individuals you'll ever meet. He's passionate about delivering capabilities for the warfighter in the ways that are most useful. He co-founded Darkhive in fall of 2021, right before Russia's invasion of Ukraine, to build an American tactical drone that could compete on cost and performance with foreign behemoths. In the time since, Darkhive has been on a tear. In this episode, John shares his motivations, his stories, and some of his secrets. Let's dive in. All right. So today's guest is John Goodson, the CEO and co-founder of Darkhive. John, we are so grateful to you for making some time to be with us. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, really happy to be here, man. Thanks for having me.
John, you got an awesome background. You special operator. You spent some time kind of learning the industry side of things, and then you launched this company, Darkhive. Did you always know you wanted to be an entrepreneur?
No, not at all. Rewinding back and thinking about, where I was at in the community when I was still in uniform, not as a capital O operator, but as a technician and enabler and everything. I was early days was just kind of all about the mission. Still am, obviously. The family grew and, the priorities changed, and I transitioned out of the military and started working on, this side of the house on the, the developer defense tech side of things. I always kind of just thought of myself as still being a guy that supports the mission. That's what I was. I was a small cog in a larger machine, and I was very happy to be there and just, be contributing in any way that I could meaningfully. And so I come from a community that does its best to destroy egos, sometimes unsuccessfully, but it certainly did the trick with me, I think. And so it was never about, I can't wait to go off and start a company and, and be the CEO. It was like, no, there's a pretty critical gap in the defense community right now in the space, and this particular space where we decided to focus, and the only way to solve it and to continue to contribute and be a good teammate to all the folks I used to work with, to the folks I'm privileged enough to work with now, is to start something.
So, I love the dedication to mission, and we'll come back to the problem you're solving. But where do you think, where'd that mission ethos come from? Was that something in your family background, your upbringing? Where did that obsession come from?
I didn't really have. My grandfather was in the Army and transitioned out of the Air Corps into the Air Force in the early days. And I don't come from a family that has a strong background in service necessarily, but I certainly grew up with consistently being reinforced that everybody contributes. It's not about an individual; it's about the collective. And I always kind of had that in the back of my mind. And then, ultimately, when I was kind of coming toward the end of my undergrad and was looking at what came next and kind of exploring all the different options and going into the workforce, I felt kind of pulled in a very different direction. And I just decided to go with it, and very, very happy I did. Obviously, I found incredible teammates, incredible mentors, and just had experiences I wouldn't trade for the world. Got to be a part of a community that I still hold in extremely high regard, and obviously do everything that I can to keep contributing to the fight. So
absolutely, and you're doing big things in that. It's interesting. There actually was a report came out the other day. I don't know if you saw this, that more college graduates now are applying to government jobs, to public sector jobs, than we've seen really in the last 5-10 years. I think there is this sense that people want to be part of something, especially as there's loss of meaning in other facets, and folks are looking for meaning in others. So it's cool. It was neat to see. I was grateful to see that.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
So, to your point, right? You didn't jump from the military direct into the entrepreneurial journey. You joined the contractor CTI. I'm kind of curious to talk to us for a minute or two just about your own kind of transition and how you found that role and why it appealed to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I was very, very explicit with my leadership when I made the decision not to re-enlist, that I was not going to be working in the defense tech sector at all. Like, don't come to me with jobs for radio vendors, for any of the major firearms companies. Don't come to me with any of these jobs. I'm done.
And I wanted a clean break.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't done because, again, I was, ready to move away from mission. I was done because I was so uncomfortable with the idea of getting out of uniform and having to come back in the next day in a suit and tie and try to tell all my old teammates that, no, I swear this radio is so much better than any other radio you have. That feels really wrong to me. I just don't feel comfortable with it. I had a really bad association with field service reps and all the vendors. It just felt really uncomfortable for me to go into like a salesman role. My senior enlisted advisor at the command grabbed me one day. I was going back and forth interviewing in biomed and pharma and stuff. I mean, I was, I had it in my head. I was, talking with a bunch of different companies like, man, curing cancer, there's a mission I can get behind and I can throw some weight behind that and build a career around that. And I thought that would be, that's a very large and lofty idea that I could get behind, similar to the way that I got behind, special operations. And my senior enlisted advisor grabbed me and he said, "You're going to meet with this national lab." I said, "I don't want to work in the sector." He said, "Shut your mouth. You're going to meet with this rep from this national lab." I said, "Fine." I go and I sit down and starts walking me through all the capabilities in, this suite of software applications they build. And I'm just kind of nodding, arms crossed, not really engaged. And then he says, "Oh, and by the way, this is all open government off the shelf software. Like, you can take it. Like, you never have to talk to me again when we're done with this conversation. You can just take it." I was like, "How does that work?" He said, "Well, I mean, the government paid for it. We have, as a national lab and the work that we're doing and the way that we set up, the IP around this, we built it to have, fully open interfaces so that others can extend the capabilities of it. And at the end of the day, it's government owned. If, the government decides they want to not allow us to work on it anymore, they want to have, another company or another lab to work on it or branch it off and to do whatever they want, they have absolute flexibility to do that." And that captured my attention immediately. I was 100% on board with that concept. This idea that the government has ownership of this such a critical capability and what it was ultimately is the TAC family of systems, ATAC, WinTAC, TAC server, WinTAC, all that stuff, right? And that was so compelling to me and was something I could get behind. It was like a mission I could get behind. It was really more about going hard against everything that I had so much difficulty with when I was in uniform, which was, this is better than that, and mine is better than this, and we own it all, and it's proprietary and vertically integrated, and you can't play. And I said, I really hate that so much, and I want no part of it. And this was the exact opposite of that. I'd found this community of engineers and users and all of these folks that were just about building better capabilities and saying, "I built it, it's yours. Take it, run with it." And from there, I had a good enough dipping my toe in the water on the lab side to learn a lot about the software development lifecycle, leading small software development teams as a program manager, that when one of our subcontractors, CTI, made an offer to join their team that was very interesting to me, expanded the horizon of what I would be able to focus on in business development, strategic contracting, really kind of take what I had learned and begin to have the opportunity, again, to get after mission in a more focused way with more broader impacts. I had to sign on and I did it. And it was incredible. It was probably, even given everything that I did in uniform, some of the most stressful times in my life, juggling all these different proposals, trying to line up long-term contracting strategies. But I had such amazing mentorship there. Carrie Murphy, the COO over there, is just incredible. She taught me everything that I know. And I left at the end of that just like, wow, actually, I know program management, I know strategic contracting, I know product development, I know internal operations, I know we're in a spot between me and my partner, Steve, where if we wanted to, we could launch something of our own.
So, man, it's such a neat story. The mission focus is so clear. Mentorship is a theme that comes up here all the time. This is ultimately, it's like everything else, people, business, relationships just drive so much of this. But I want to actually pull the thread on that interest of yours, which was that GOTS, that government-owned element, and how that appealed to you as someone who'd been on the other side, who'd had the vendors coming in saying, "Hey, play with my toy, try my thing. It's super cool. I own it all." And now you're here on the other side, right? You're a venture-backed business, building for defense. How has your perception or your kind of philosophy around that informed how you all are building at Darkhive? I know we haven't even introduced the company yet, but let's start with the ethos and the philosophy of how does that inform how you all build and deliver capability, and how's it changed?
Really great question. And I'd say that our time, my partner and I at CTI, our time there has informed so much of our approach in the hardware space. Last company, all we did was integrating other people's stuff, their radios into ATAC, their software analytics into ATAC, all different sensors and platforms and all this other stuff. And what you learn when you do nothing but systems integration all the time is that the majority of vendors who are producing everything I just described typically have little to no interest in their system ever plugging into anything else. That is like the furthest thing from their mind. They are thought of as these siloed, standalone solutions. But why that's so frustrating, and I'd go even further and say infuriating, not just for the government, but for systems integrators, is because that is so myopic. And it leads to a battlefield with completely unintegrated systems, unable to talk to one another. Why we have next gen aircraft that are built by the same vendor that can't talk to one another. It's such a critical problem. And so, we, having seen that side of it and then taking a step back and looking at what we wanted to build, how can we build something that addresses a critical operational need in a way that does not discount the significance of integration from the beginning? That, leaning very hard on our past experience again from CTI, was this needs to be open. Okay, but not just open, discoverable. Discoverable as in you can Google how to interact with our entire family of systems. That's how open it needs to be. Because what happens when they go away? And it's just cycle after cycle after cycle. And all the hype machine and everything else aside, it drove me crazy at the last company because it was me peeking under the curtain and seeing this is why we're winding all the way back to 16 years ago or so when I'm running around with the platoon and we're getting shot at. And I can look at a guy and key up on my radio. I can literally see him and he can't pick me up on comm. He can't communicate with aircraft. We have all of these problems, and it all comes back around to everything's broken, nothing works, and why? It's because integration is always an afterthought. The way the government wants to acquire things and the way they want to sustain them and manage them over time is never thought of. And we can't yada yada that when we stand our own thing up. We need to build something that not only is appealing to users, the thing I would like when I was still running around, but it also needs to be built in a way that program offices will not only pick it up and grab it and hold on to it, but they'll sustain it and grow it over time, the way the TAC family of systems has. That is the benchmark for what successful software development, partnership with industry plus government looks like in terms of scale, organic growth. It's just incredible. So that's the model for it all in my mind.
It's an amazing level of insight of and empathy, which is just one of those themes we come back to again and again. Companies don't have the ability to put themselves in the mindset of the user groups. It's not that we have to back only, veteran founders or only operator founders because they're veterans, because they're operators. It's because they understand what it's like to be on that other side and what it's like to get that crappy mission outcome, product that makes their lives harder, not better. that makes it more difficult, not easier, to accomplish the task at hand. And so hearing those design principles that well thought out and articulated before you even start the company is really remarkable. And I want to take a step back and just ask you about you're a guy with a lot of conviction. And I want to understand the conviction of what was the problem that you were deeply invested in solving with this company, the mission problem that you wanted to solve.
Yeah. So rewinding the clock back, when I was still running around doing things out in the field, I wasn't a drone pilot. That wasn't my job in the platoon. But we had a couple SEALs that were trained as drone pilots, and we had a larger fixed wing that was available to us when we were still, it was a 2012 deployment, 2012 to 2013 in southern Afghanistan. Watching how difficult this platform was to fly, watching it crash repeatedly, we would have to go out and recover it. And this happened so many times that our ground force commander, our platoon OIC, basically said, we're not going to put it up anymore. This is too much of a distraction. It's taken too much time, and we're not getting any benefit from it. So that stuck with me a lot, not just from the perspective it gave me on drones, but just generally, like all the little stuff about it. You know, the drone had its own special little laptop that you had to break out. It wasn't integrated with any of the other stuff we already had in our vehicle package. That seemed odd to me. Had its own special radio. Everything was like specialized. Again, vertically integrated, siloed. You had to buy all this stuff, bring it out to the field, only to watch this extremely expensive piece of equipment go crater itself into the side of a mountain and then have to be recovered. So I thought a lot about that. And as we were early days of Darkhive, did honestly what I did every time I had a question about, a particular direction that we need to go. I think a lot of, if there's anything that's worked well for me personally since getting out of uniform, it's not been to look at myself and my experience and say, okay, that's good enough. I've got the military user angle covered. That's never been the appropriate answer for me. It's always been, I can get us oriented in a direction to ask questions of people whose opinion matters much more than me. And that's what I always did. And so I went back to my old platoon, at least the folks and where they were at from my old platoon, and hung around and asked questions and, looked around the high bay where all the equipment was at. And I saw a bunch of drones sitting on shelves, and newer stuff than what we'd had, quad rotor style, looked much more zippy stuff I'd seen on the news, stuff I'd seen on LinkedIn. And I kind of pointed to it and I said, how's it going, man? This is so much better than what we had back in the day. And the blunt feedback that I got was not really. I said, well, why? I said, well, going left to right on the shelf, $100,000, $60,000, and you have to buy two. $40,000 can't, once you go indoors, it flies itself into a wall and breaks the propeller. The propeller is $2,000 a unit. And as they're going down the line, I was like, okay, well, cost. And they said, yeah, cost one. But the other thing is, it's just painfully obvious these are built by drone pilots. Like, they don't seem to think much about all the other operational constraints that, shooters, ground pounders have. They're used to being able to focus only on flying a drone and having this very special, exquisite machine that does these things and can maneuver in a way that it can, only because they are highly trained. And that's the problem for kind of arriving at this conclusion, launching the company. Did it in late 2021. And initially from early phase investors and even like some of the folks kind of from the DoD side of the house who were kind of having an early look at us, like, you guys have no idea what you're talking about. All these other companies that are out there on the market today, they're going to run the world. You have no idea what's going on. And then, of course, Russia invaded Ukraine in February of 2022. And from then all the way until now, you did not see a single U.S. drone being flown on the front lines. And that started getting people talking and started generating interest in what we were doing, because folks started realizing that no, the hype videos online, all the marketing blitz that's going on does not matter when it comes down, when you get down to the ground level. Because when you get down to the ground level, sorry to say it, U.S. forces are still taking DJIs out to the field. Doesn't matter if they're banned. Guys will get on Amazon and swipe a credit card and buy the thing that works. Doesn't matter what you've equipped them with. And this is the problem, not just in the United States, but when I look overseas at what's happening in Ukraine, that is absolutely indicative of what we could expect in a conflict in the South China Sea. all of our partners in an island hopping campaign, they are not bringing anything US made. They are bringing DJI and Autel robotics because they are the most affordable, best products in the world. And that was the gap we saw. And that's what we oriented toward and married it all up with what we were talking about previously, which was the product can be good, but how do I fold it into the POR massive infrastructure system of systems? Has to be open. There has to be a way to plug all of this in.
That's some heady stuff, man. I mean, that's the looking at the whole market in that way, where business model matches outcome, or matching kind of just an outcome you're after to a model that works both for you and for the end user. And yeah, I mean, timing is so much. It's not everything, but it is so much of things in the business world. You guys definitely, for the better part of the last 2 decades, drones have not been a great business to be in the United States, right? It's not been the kind of like promised future that many expected. Maybe that's changing now. I don't know. We'll talk about that maybe as a little bit later on. But John, I'm curious about, from you alluded to it. You came in, may not be a great business, but it's certainly a crowded business. A lot of drone manufacturers, both domestically and abroad. And for you guys to come in, what did it take to kind of get your first swings? Who did you find that said, yeah, we're willing to kick the tires or at least get in the canoe with you and see if you guys have the chops?
Yeah, great question. So I think we're very, very fortunate, my partner and I, that when we were doing early phase kind of fundraising and chasing the early phase contract awards, your phase 1 STTRs, SBIRs, we could honestly point to past experience and past performance. And I swear we know this industry. Like, look at these awards, see who the principal investigator was, see who the co-PI was on these awards. It's my partner, Steve, and I. So when you have that and you can point early phase investors to it, and you're not necessarily even just a former military guy that maybe has a really great idea, but has no experience in the defense tech sector, we were very fortunate to have that under our belt. And I think that helped a lot. And that's one of the things that I think gave a lot of the very earliest investors confidence in signing on board with us. And things honestly have worked the way, in my mind, they are supposed to, where there is reciprocity between the government contract side of the house and investment, where one reinforces the other. That has worked so well. I'm very happy and feel so very lucky for it to have worked to date so well for us.
What do you, John, what do you mean by that? Like, you get a SBIR and an investor responds, or you see some sort of demand signal from an end user group and the private capital markets account for that? Or what do you mean?
Yeah, I'll give you a really great example. And just because it was one of the, looking back on it, was one of the most significant and one of the happiest moments still since we started the company. We were out pitch competition like you do up in Dallas. And it was my alma mater at UT Dallas. And we're pitching against several other companies. We didn't even have a single contract award under our belt at that point. Going toe to toe, we had companies talking about, multi-phase awards, all this stuff that they were pursuing. And we didn't have a single contract under our belt. And right after we finished pitching, walked off the stage, and one of the judges for the panel that was also a partner at the VC that was going to invest in whoever won the competition kind of walked up and said, man, as soon as you guys have an award, man, you guys are going to be in such a good spot, man. It's pretty tight right now. And then I kid you not, 10 minutes after he had said that to me, got the email from Air Force Research Lab notifying us we'd been selected and funded for our very first phase 1 SBIR. Was able to run immediately over there and say, here it is, selected and funded. Now, something could go sideways in negotiation, but it rarely does. So, and we won the competition, got our first, one of our first like $50K checks. That's kind of what I mean, is that, yeah, exactly to your point, the government showing confidence feeds investor confidence. Investor confidence feeds government buy-in and basically de-risks them. This is what I always talk about with folks who want to sit down and talk about how to kind of, slice this beast of going after, government contracts. Is like, you have to think about this from the perspective of the government, particularly in early phase research development and technical experimentation contracts. This is an investment the government is making. They are choosing to program their money, and similar to VCs, they want to see a win. Not because, there's some big financial monetary benefit for them, but no, that's their career. Picking a winner is potentially career making for folks who do it correctly. That's really important from the government perspective. It's both folks are looking for good investments. And so confidence on either side helps reinforce the other. And that's certainly what we found, to date at least. So.
No, it's cool. It's, system working as intended. And, there's discussion around, does an SBIR, is that really government buying intent? Is that what kind of signal is that? But you were talking about a seed, an early stage financing round, right? You're not talking about a Series A, Series B. We're not talking about a IDIQ with a $900 million ceiling and no task orders. We're talking about, hey, government's going to give them a chance, right? And so if you're at that earliest round, that pre-seed, that seed round, where the question is, do these guys have a fighting chance? Are they going to get in the sandbox or in the arena or whatever analogy or metaphor you want to use? Are they going to have access to end users and the ability to actually iterate on what they're building? And that kind of buy signal, I think, is at least a sign, hey, they're going to have enough access to take a swing. And that's, that matters at that early size.
Yep. Only on the early phase side, you hit it on the head. There's absolutely RDT&E dollars do not equal sales. That is not real revenue. So.
Yeah, well, that's a bigger, absolutely. And so, but it did get you guys it got you in the fight, and lo and behold, y'all did what now we know because we're here having this conversation. You overperformed on those deals, and in fact, dramatically accelerated a transition, right, to a phase 3. Tell us that story. What was the group that you kind of found this nice partnership with, and what happened next? Yeah,
great question. As I mentioned, kind of leaning very heavily on what we'd done so much of at the last company, we knew that we were going to land, even if just internally, on this idea of this, continuous integration framework, continuous software delivery for edge systems. We're going to have to do it for ourselves. Even if we never integrated anybody else, any other software other than ours, whatever. We needed the ability to dynamically change the capabilities of our systems in the field on the fly. That has to happen, and it has to be done securely. So as we were building this out, and as we were looking at kind of the direction the winds were blowing and a lot of the interest in being able to do a lot of what we were intending to do for ourselves in uncrewed vehicle land, not just for air, small group ones, but also for larger vehicles, all the way down to ground vehicles, sea surface vessels, undersea vessels, all this stuff. We said, this is potentially going to be very large, and we need to get in a position to be able to move out very quickly when seeing where the ball is going right now. So we scraped together what we thought to be a really compelling phase 1 proposal, a little RFP on the open topic that the Air Force puts out. And it was compelling, and we did get a ton of buy-in. We were shocked, actually, at the numbers of letters of support that we were able to get, not just from the Air Force, but with the Space Force, the Army, the Marine Corps, the Navy. It was probably the most heavy-hitting proposal in terms of support that I have ever written, and I have written a lot of proposals.
Order of magnitude, how many letters of support are we talking here? 5, 10, 20, 50?
We had about 20 letters of support for that one when we sent it across the floor. And again, letters of support can be incredibly difficult to get one sometimes. So being able to get them from so many different organizations across the DoD, felt very confident in it. And the timing, again, just could not have been better. Timing couldn't have been better because in this same window, after we were awarded, we were selected and funded for that and 2 other phase 1s on the open topic. Timing couldn't have been better because then AFWERX Prime stood up Autonomy Prime. And Autonomy Prime released its first RFI in October of that year, in October of 2022. And what were they asking for? Everything that we had proposed inside of that phase 1. We knew and engaged with the core, or who would become our core, but one of the TPOCs out there. This was a software director that got stood up for Autonomy Prime and had it confirmed. Yes, this is exactly what I am looking for. And now you have a phase 1, and you have sole source justification for me taking this direct to a phase 3 award. and I'm going to do that. And he started moving that right after we finished executing the phase one. We were immediately up and running and moving towards our award in May of the following year for the initial $5 million ceiling. So it's so much of just knowing where the ball is going to be. And that's the thing. There's no, I wish going all the way back to this open GOTS, core infrastructure concept for linchpin technologies. This isn't secret. The government's very explicit that this is what they want. They have whole organizations and concepts around modular open systems architecture. They've described this in so many different ways over the past 20 years. And so it's not a secret. It's just a matter of trying to think critically about what business model you can build to meet that need and still run an effective company that can scale. And so anyway, that's how it happened. I mean, it was just right place, right time, but also seeing where the ball was going.
But you know what? It's also about doing the work, having those relationships, and being ready to seize that opportunity, which many don't. And frankly, there's a lot of companies that say they do a lot of the things the government wants. It's easy to say you have this model or that model. I imagine that you were probably competing with some larger and better funded companies at that moment in time. What enabled you to win where maybe they came up short?
Giving the government what they're asking for. Honestly, that's it. That's the end of it. So often the government says, and I mean, and you know this quite well, I want X, and then I want X to be fully open. Like I want a sensor data fusion engine that is fully open. They say, okay, cool. I heard what you said. So I'm going to open up an interface into my black box, and I gave you what you wanted, right? And government says, no, that's not what I asked you for. They say, well, what else is out there? Government's like, nothing, I guess. So sure, let's do a limited scope of work on this, because I guess I'm just not going to get what I want, because the research labs struggle to give it to me when I have government engineers working solely. Industry doesn't want to give it to me because they can't figure out how to make a proper business around it. And so I guess I'm just left with the thing that I'm going to build out, do a concept and experimentation demonstration of somewhere in the world, and then it's probably going to get mothballed. And even if it does transition, like we mentioned earlier, program office might kick it out of the room a year into a 5-year award.
On that happy note, let's talk about transition for you guys and for Darkhive. So, I mean, y'all have continued to rack up some solid wins and some solid kind of opportunities to get in the game there. Even talking about Autonomy Prime and what y'all did there. What does transition mean to you all right now? Are you in a palm cycle? How are you thinking about programmatic revenue, recurring revenue, and kind of institutionalizing the good work that you've started?
Yeah. When I think about transition, I mean, it can mean a few things. Transitioning to a program of record, that's the natural path, right? There's good O&M, spiral integration funding there potentially, proc money to buy, additional units, servicing them in the field. I mean, that's good. I mean, you look at, there are big programs out there that are, far down the line and, vetting what, might be the next generation, reconnaissance group ones, things like that. But the challenge seems to be in the space that we're operating in. And I'm not talking specifically for us. I'm just talking for, the industry as a whole, is that everyone's starting to realize, and I'll look at the Army and a lot of what they've released recently as a good example, that this technology is changing too rapidly to push for a large multi-year award to the tune of $100 million for, for buying smalls. Well, that small might not cut it next year. What do I do then? They're moving more toward a model that I think is the most attractive for the transition of a lot of our hardware-based capabilities, which is the service components and at the unit level should have discretion over the budget that they apply for smalls. The Army's moving in that direction. I would like to see the other service components move in that direction too, because they're going to pick what works for them. And that to me is the transition pathway that I most closely align to. There are so many amazing channel partners out there that already have large scale contract vehicles that can manage procurement at scale. There's the GS8 schedule. There's, TLS contract. There's all kinds of stuff out there to transition your hardware without trying to employ, a monster BD task force to go hammer Fort Liberty trying to win this one IDIQ. If our kit is so good, users will find a way to buy it. That's been my philosophy because that's the philosophy that I had when I was still in uniform. When me or the platoon wanted to get something that was really important and wasn't $100,000 per unit, we would figure out a way to get it. And that's what we really need to have. And what I think the Army is setting a good example and kind of laying out is maybe the end of the rainbow isn't a multi-year award in a PEO. Maybe it's just having a really good product that moves. And then at least for our side of things and looking at the managed software services approach that we have for all of our software side of the house, maybe it's not, this thing, it's not a SaaS offering that has this massive margin because it's all licensed. It might just be some really talented engineers sitting in a room and maybe an 8 to 10% negotiated fixed fee on a cost plus contract. And that's fine because you're still delivering a ton of value and you still have a great team that is right there in the room working with the customer and delivering value.
So two just absolute bangers in that answer. And the first, I mean, honestly, I feel like we need to have a debate resolved. The best product in defense will win. And I could find a ton of investors probably who take the other side. So it's clear that you've cultivated a company, a team, an investor, like a capital stack of people who are aligned with your views, recognizing that not everybody is. There are plenty of people who would say, you're investing too much in product, just go invest in the proposal shop and the BD shop and just jam it down their throats, right? And we know those people exist. I have a ton of respect for where you're coming from on it and that you're making it work for you. The second thing that just I think is hugely insightful is this idea that in the current rate of technology change, not in every capability, but in certain capabilities, is such that the government is recognizing that the old way of doing business, of locking into multi-year procurements with the same vendor, where they're responsible for selling it, maintaining it, operating it, blah, 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 that just doesn't work. Not everywhere, but in certain capabilities. And so if we're seeing now actual movements towards, hey, look, everybody always talks about program of record as like the holy grail. That's the thing. You can lock that revenue, you bank it, you can go, fuck off to the Bahamas for a few years and it's still going to be there. That's changing. And so for companies like Darkhive to be able to win in that new environment, which I think it's just about aligning incentives, is like the incentive for continuous iteration, for continuing to fight for that each and every day, I think is really exciting. It should be exciting for the end users, the warfighters. It should be exciting for the taxpayers. And it should be exciting for the really great companies that are getting built. Not every company. It's not exciting for everybody. But the great companies that are building great teams that are mission aligned, I think that's a huge development. I'm tempted to just leave it there, but give us a note of optimism. Give us something that you're excited about for the company or for the industry as you look to the future.
Yeah, I'll say that I have been so incredibly impressed by the level of technical skill that I see and technical understanding that I see in some really important places across the DoD right now. So the people within DIU, within AFWorks, within CDAO, that I see who really understand the problems, like really understand them, not just from like a whiteboard, OV1, I understand the problem, but no, they understand the real technical challenges that are in front of the capabilities that we need to develop to be ready for a conflict with a near peer threat. So that makes me very optimistic that if the DoD can retain and support the amazing talent that it has within its doors right now, that we can actually do this. Industry has to do its part too. But I see enough of that happening too, honestly. We're not sitting here alone, yelling out into the void, it's Darkhive, no one else understands this. It's like, no, Second Front Systems gets it. Rise 8 gets it. Our partners over at Firestorm Labs get it. I mean, I could go on and on. Like, we're not alone here on either side, industry or on the government side. And that gives me hope and confidence that we can get to that place in the future where, everything isn't always broken. It actually works as designed. We can actually get after mission meaningfully.
That's a great place to end it. It's all about people. It's all about ecosystem. I love that. John, super grateful for your time today. Speaking of people and speaking of ecosystem, if some of the listeners here want to get involved in the Darkhive ecosystem, where should they go to learn more or to join the team?
Yeah, absolutely. Head over to the website, darkhive.com, check out what's going on, reach out to us if you want to hang out, and we'd love to connect.
All right, man. Hey, thanks for everything you're doing. Keep on keeping on. We're rooting for you.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.